Hello, my name is John Ortiz, and welcome to my presentation on information security risk management procedures. Today, I will be walking you through the process of creating a robust system to protect your organization's valuable information. Don't worry if you're not a tech expert, I will explain everything in simple terms. Let's start with the basics. Information security risk management is all about identifying potential threats to our data and systems, figuring out how serious they are, and then deciding what to do about them. In today's digital world, we rely heavily on computers and the internet. This process is more important than ever. Everything we do in our digital lives comes with risk, and the risk multiplies the greater your footprint. Understanding those risks and mitigating them will help protect from bad actors. Now, the first step in our journey is to identify the risk. This is like being a detective. We need to find all the possible ways our information could be at risk. We do this through three main methods: taking inventory of all our digital assets, the asset inventory, understanding the threat to those assets, the threat analysis, and figuring out how susceptible we are to those threats, the vulnerability analysis. Starting out with asset inventory. Here, we take an inventory of all our assets, everything we own. Meaning, a very detailed list is created that shows all the hardware, software, and other equipment or programs that are used to conduct business digitally. This will feed a list of the high value items that should be prioritized to protect. Don't forget to account for the humans in your asset list. Sometimes, believe it or not, people can be our biggest risk. Next, we look at threats. These are the bad things that could happen. They might come from outside, like hackers or computer viruses, or from inside, like an employee accidentally sharing sensitive information. Remember that the human factor can be the greatest threat at times. Identifying these threat actors gives a better understanding of where a threat is coming from and helps clarify how such a threat should be mitigated. The final step in risk identification is to assess the vulnerabilities. We now know what it is we need to protect and where the potential threat can come from. Assessing the vulnerabilities identifies the weak spots. For example, if we're not updating our software regularly, that's a vulnerability because we're using software that is greater risk of being exploited. If people are using weak passwords like 123456, that can also be another vulnerability. Once we've identified all these risks, we need to classify them. There are two main factors to consider. How bad would it be if the identified risk was actually exploited, and how likely is it to happen? We often use a simple chart called a risk matrix to visualize this. It helps us see which risks we really need to worry about. Now that we have classified all the risks, next comes the prioritization. We can't tackle every single risk at once, so we need to decide which ones to focus on first. We consider things like how much money we could lose, whether we might break any laws, or if our reputation could be damaged. There are different ways to do this, but the goal is always to focus on the most important risks first. Now, let's talk about how we assess these risks. There are two main approaches: the qualitative and the quantitative. Qualitative assessment is more about expert judgment. We might rate risks as low, medium, or high based on our experience and knowledge. The quantitative assessment, on the other hand, uses numbers. We might calculate how much money we could lose if a particular risk becomes a reality. All of this information gets recorded in what we call a risk register. Think of it as a big spreadsheet that lists all your risks, who's responsible for managing each one, what we're currently doing about it, and how serious we think it is. It's important to keep this up to date as things change. Now that we know what our risks are, we need to figure out how to control them. There are three main types of controls: the preventative controls, the detective controls, and the corrective controls. Preventative controls try to stop bad things from happening in the first place. These are things like firewalls that block unauthorized access to our network, or training programs that teach employees how to spot phishing emails. Detective controls help us notice when something's gone wrong. For example, we might have systems that alert us if someone's trying to log in from an unusual location. Corrective controls help us fix things after an incident. This might include having backup systems so we can quickly recover lost data, or plans for how to respond if we do get hacked. So far, we have identified our risk and developed control measures for those risks. Now, we need to understand our options of how the risk should be handled. When it comes to actually dealing with our risks, we have four main strategies: risk acceptance, risk avoidance, risk transfer, and risk reduction. The first strategy is risk acceptance. Here we can accept the risk if it's not too serious or wouldn't cost too much to fix. We can also accept the risk if there is a low impact or likelihood of occurring. Next is risk avoidance. We can avoid the risk by stopping whatever activity is causing it, and we can also reduce the amount of sensitive data that is being stored to help keep a smaller digital footprint. Another option is to transfer the risk. We can transfer the risk by outsourcing or buying insurance to help move the risk to a third party. The final strategy is we can try and reduce the overall risk by implementing controls and balancing the cost to impact. The choice really depends on the specific risk and our organization's needs. Sometimes it makes sense to just accept all the small risks. Other times, we might need to make big changes to avoid a serious threat. Remember, this isn't a one-time process. We need to keep monitoring our risk and updating our plans as things change. New threats emerge all the time in the digital world, so we need to stay on our toes. To wrap up, let's recap the key steps. Identify the risks and classify them, prioritize them and assess them, control them, and keep on monitoring. It's a cycle that never really ends. The most important thing to remember is that information security isn't just an IT issue, it's everyone's responsibility. By understanding these concepts and staying alert, each of us can play a part in keeping our organization's information safe. Thank you for your attention, and I hope this overview has given you a clear picture of how we manage information security risks.